democracy is not a political condition that is expanding in the world. In the United Nations, there are 142 nations now, there will be shortly. Maybe 25 are democracies. We are a small and increasingly beleaguered minority, and we have got to stand up for what we care about because it matters.
Does it? Why? If democracy is an ideal, one for which we assume all people strive, why is it that so many nations are choosing other forms of government? And if capitalism has worked well for 200 years in America, why are so many nations choosing other forms of economic organization? How are societies organized? How are nations governed? Are some social systems better than others? Few things have as permanent a place in history as the search for an ideal society. A cooperative community dedicated to equality and human dignity. However, as journalist Chalmers Roberts points out,
for most of the world's history and for most of the world's people, tyranny has been the human condition.
For thousands of years, governments belonged to the powerful, and their power was often absolute.
Democracy, the idea that people can be governed by the consent of the governed, has always been the exception.
Young America was the exception. It was governed pretty much the way Adam Smith, the champion of capitalism, said nations should be governed.
The best government is the government which governs least. The best policy is that which arises from the spontaneous and unhindered actions of individuals.
A government only for preserving order and carrying out routine functions? An economy with few restraints, where use of the nation's resources are determined by individuals competing for private profit in an open market? Can you see how such a system would lead to a tradition of great freedom for individuals? Freedom to use one's talents, money, land, and resources? Yet with the rise of industrialism, America seemed to many to be governed by greed, controlled by the wealthy in frantic search for greater personal gains.
We all know it. In this country,
this produced a passion for reform and a fertile ground for many experiments in alternate lifestyles.
Renounce the works of the world as too materialistic. Shun the vulgar and the frivolous. Seek a truly spiritual existence.
So said Bronson Alcott, a New England idealist. He, along with such eminent writers as Emerson, Hawthorne, Thoreau, and the outspoken feminist Margaret Fuller, began an experiment at Brook Farm in 1843.
We pooled our labor, capital, and property. Everything was to be owned in common. We were to produce our own food. In the evening, we would gather to discuss nature, God, and the perfectibility of man.
But just a few months after Brook Farm had begun, its unity was shattered by internal dissent. Few could agree on the goals of their experiment. Their attempt to create a utopian or ideal society where all would share in a communion of interests and needs had failed. As Margaret Fuller said,
I despair of accomplishing anything in groups.
But such utopian movements reflected a worldwide revulsion against the worst aspects of capitalism, the new harsh industrialism, its ugliness and brutality, its terrible uncertainties. When he saw the squalid slums and the extreme destitution spawned by industrialism in Germany and England, Karl Marx, a sensitive and emotional young man, experienced the same profound shock as did so many others. But he did not believe that such evils would vanish through the example of such high-minded experiments as Brook Farm. To Marx, industrial capitalism was built on the exploitation of the great mass of workers, or proletariat, by those who own the means of production, the bourgeoisie.
The history of all existing society is the history of class struggles. Society as a whole is splitting up into two great hostile camps, into two great classes directly facing each other, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Under every kind of industrial society, the great mass of the world's burden bearers are doomed to live lives of poverty and want, while the few live in luxury. The few make the laws, tell the many under what conditions they should labor, what rewards they should obtain for the labor.
Since those who set the values of society, who govern it politically, would not relinquish power, the only answer was violent revolution, the overthrow of the existing capitalist order. Together with Friedrich Engels, Marx proclaimed this doctrine in the Communist Manifesto in 1848.
Arise, you prisoners of salvation, arise, you wretched of the earth, for justice thunders condemnation, a better world's in birth. No more tradition's chains shall bind us, arise, you slaves, no more in thrall. The earth shall rise on new foundations, we have it not, we shall be all. 'Tis the final conflict, let each stand in his place. The international shall be the whole human race.
According to Marx and Engels, the government would be captured by the aroused masses, who would take over the means of production, the factories, mills, and mines from the capitalists, and during a brief dictatorship of the proletariat, would establish a truly communist society. All private property would be abolished. The government would then wither away, and man at last would become truly free in a classless society, free from the exploitation of the political and economic elites. Marx and Engels' utopian vision of a selfless cooperative order that would spread throughout the world attracted many disciples. Among them, a Russian intellectual, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. In 1918, Lenin, with his small party of Bolsheviks, seized power in Russia.
We have shattered the capitalist machine. With the revolution, the door is open for the transition from the first phase of the communist society to the complete withering away of the state.
This followed Marx's ideas. But how long after the revolution before the state withers away? How long before the proletariat truly owns and rules the country? Until the period of transition was over, Lenin said, the Communist Party must govern.
Until then, we must rule with an iron hand.
Under the iron hand of Joseph Stalin, Lenin's successor, an infamous police state was developed. A party member described it this way.
You had to constantly worry if someone was watching you. Of course, it was none of your business to find out who. If the party told you there was something wrong with you, you had to believe it. After all, you were only good so long as the party said so.
Private property was abolished. the state took over all business and industry. Farmers and workers were mobilized for collective production. Russia's backward feudal social system was transformed through the raw power of party and state. The old order was shattered, and communist Russia began a remarkable 60-year period of economic expansion. Today, the Soviet Union ranks among the world's leading industrial nations, yet an iron rule still prevails. The government is made up of a council of ministers who run the major departments and agencies, and the Supreme Soviet, or national legislature. But all basic policy decisions flow from the Central Committee of the Communist Party, whose power is largely unchallenged. In theory, the political system does not seem very much different from that of a Western-style parliamentary democracy. But what makes it so different in practice is the fact that there is a single political party, the Communist Party, with a remarkable concentration of power. The concentration of power within a single party is justified on the grounds that since there is only one class in the Soviet Union, the working class, there can be only one party to safeguard its interests. But today, 60 years after the revolution, there remains a wide gap between theory and practice in achieving a classless society in Russia.
I found out a lot about class differences during my year at Moscow University as an exchange student. My Russian friends called it the nomenklatura, a secret roster of party bosses and appointed bureaucrats who make up what some refer to as the communist nobility. They not only govern, they run the whole show, right down to the smallest village. In recent years, their heavy-handed planning of the Soviet command economy has made it somewhat more responsive to demand, as in our system. But these planners still pretty much decide everything. How much wheat will be grown, and how many cars or shoes will be manufactured, and the kind of jobs people will do. In theory, wage-level differences between workers are to be kept under control. But in practice, a manager can make up to 15 times as much as a skilled worker in the same factory. But it's the special fringe benefits that really add up for the privileged bureaucrats. There's chauffeured cars for the начальство, the top brass, and access to special hospitals and consumer products.
No doubt these problems are very similar to the problems encountered in a capitalist country. Marx recognized these problems, but he did not see the real gains capitalism could bring. The development of labor organizations powerful enough to demand their rights, and a large, comfortable middle class uninterested in revolution. Yet today, both America and the Soviet Union have common interests, as historian Charles Thayer points out.
The problems of the two superpowers are really very much the same. How to prevent great accumulations of wealth and privilege on one side, and poverty and underprivilege on the other. How to divide the national production between private needs like education and cars, and public needs like space vehicles and defense.
Then why are Russia and the United States, with the problems they share as industrial technological societies, still competing? Today, most of the new nations of Africa and Asia will not call themselves either capitalist or communist. Why not? What other ways are they finding to organize their societies and govern their people?